Welcome everyone to Sharing Soulful Stories. Today I'm here with Clare Kinsey. Welcome, Clare.
Hi, Joe. Hi, everyone.
I'm just going to tell everyone a little bit more about you, Clare. So Clare is a career empowerment and mindset coach who is passionate about supporting people who are transitioning or wanting to transition into a new job, career or business in order to live a life that they love. Clare also works as a marketing director in a global financial services company and would describe herself as a corporate hippie. Yay. Welcome, Clare. I'm so happy to have you here. As you know, I love that you're bringing a corporate background into this conversation, albeit I'm not suggesting that needs to come through the story, but if it should come through the story, because I know spirituality can feel quite new agey, and as an ex-corporate person myself, it didn't feel like it fit in my experience within that job. So I completely get the service that you're trying to offer for people who are like, I want to explore this, but it doesn't fit in this, like, while I'm doing this job over here. So I'd love to kick off with the question, what does spirituality mean to you?
Okay, so spirituality to me essentially means love. So I think every person in the world has their own definition of what love means. For me individually, it's four things. It's compassion, it's trust, it's kindness, and it's openness. So they're the things that matter to me. And so when I think about spirituality, I think about my heart and I think about love. And I think about the dynamic between what's underneath that, so what's deeper than that in terms of my soul, and also how it interacts with my mind. And sometimes I correlate my mind with my ego. So if I think about spirituality, for me, it's about how does any human being define what they're really here on this earth for? And a lot of the times we come back to love and we come back to having a purpose or a greater meaning where we can show up and help others or serve other people or leave a legacy or an imprint somehow in this world, whether it be through being a parent or being a leader in a corporation, but doing it where you put humanity at the heart of it. So, I work in an environment where we can be very shareholder focused. It's all about the metrics and how you can drive growth and how you can keep shareholders happy. But for me, spirituality is more about when I'm in that corporate environment. Yes, I deliver on my expectations or the expectations of me in the shareholder world, but I want to come back to adding value to others and serve other human beings. And so for that, I want to come back to those four key components of what is love for me: compassion, trust, openness, and kindness.
Oh, I love that. Honestly, imagine if everyone in a corporate environment was bringing that version of love, compassion, trust, openness, and kindness into everything they did. I mean, the whole corporate landscape would feel very, very different, I know. What I would love to know, though, is has spirituality, because that's a beautiful definition. I really love that definition. Thank you. I've actually been loving all the definitions, and as you pointed out, no two are the same, but they're all beautiful. Yeah. They're all beautiful. But I would love to know, has spirituality always been a part of your life? Or has there been a trigger event or something that kicked off this exploration?
I think honestly, in hindsight, when I think back about my life, I think I've always been intuitive. I've always been sensitive. I've always had empathy for people, but they're facets of what I define as components of spirituality. But I've never defined myself or put a label on myself as being spiritual. And there've been a number of, I would say, trigger events in my life, some really positive, but to be honest, a lot negative or really challenging times in my life that have at the time felt highly negative to me and highly confrontational and shook me to my core and smacked me in the face in a way. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, I'm grateful for those, because what it did is it opened up this possibility of me evolving as a human being. And with that evolution came that openness to accept this concept, maybe, or this undefined and ambiguous sort of term or concept of spirituality. So I feel like the trigger episodes in my life have been, in hindsight, those that have woken me up or taken me a step further in my evolution and ascension into being much more embracive of, is that even a word, embracing of spirituality.
Oh, I love hearing that, because it's really interesting in how some of those really challenging times in life, when we look back on them in hindsight, with the ability to really stand back and hold it in a loving space, and as you mentioned, almost have that view of, I'm here to evolve in this life. So what was the lesson in that really hard time? I don't feel like it's always easy to say that to someone when they're right in it and suffering in it at the time, but it's interesting how hindsight can often give us that ability to look back and go, oh, but without that I wouldn't have, that wouldn't have gone down this whole other way. And anyway, so thank you so much for sharing that. And now I'd love it if you could share your spirituality story, like having mentioned that some of those trigger events, whether there are any highs and lows that you would like to share.
Yeah. So let me start with the positives, because I think there's 5 events in my life, 2 positive and 3, or 2 highs and 3 lows, that have really defined my path and my evolution. So the 2 positives, one was a very definitive moment, which is when I met my husband. So it was a time where I was on the verge of a lot of change in my life, and I hadn't been listening to my intuition. So I was 23 years old. I was very focused on the external. I was, in hindsight, quite self-absorbed, me. I was really seeking independence, and I didn't want to sort of stumble upon this experience that I had in the end. And what led me to meeting my husband was essentially one night where I was due to go out and meet my girlfriend for a social event. It was a Friday night, I think. It was the middle of winter. It was raining, pouring, and I had the beginnings of a head cold, and I just did not want to go out. And I'm a big introvert too, so going out is a big deal for me at the time. And I remember just being in my room, and I just remember hearing a whisper, which was inside of me, just saying, just go. Just go. And I hadn't been listening to myself for a while, so it was quite a shock to me to hear that. But I trusted it, and I went. And I remember jumping forward about an hour later, I was there. And I remember when I saw Mike, who I didn't know was Mike at the time, walk into the room, my tummy just dropped and time slowed down. And I remember thinking, that's why I was meant to be here. And so that was one of those positive moments where, magic, serendipity, all of those things where you listen to intuition and you allow yourself that to happen. Because I remember feeling more open to any possibility at that point in time in terms of the energy and the state that I was in at the time it occurred. And so that happened. And that was someone who was clearly meant to be a big, meaningful person in my life for a number of reasons. And I allowed that to happen. So that's the positive. That's probably the highlight for me. The other ones are more softer, I think, and less defined in a sense. But really in the last year, I found more and more magic being created. I think you and I have talked a bit in the past about the importance to me of magic. And that's really allowing myself just to accept that anything and everything could happen, and also allowing and accepting what's meant to be is meant to be. And with that then allows me to be much more present in a state where I can see and experience and feel things that when I'm up in my head all the time, I'm just not able to actually be present enough to see. So I'm finding that's happening more and more these days, and I feel that energy and that ascension and that evolution occurring more and more frequently these days, which I absolutely love. So they're the positives. They're the ones where I'm really like, it's happening, and I'm loving it. I truly am loving it. The negatives are more profound for me, and I hope it's not too confronting, but the first negative event was when I was 20 years old and my best friend took her own life. So that was something that I just couldn't comprehend. I refused to accept it, and I'd never in my life up until that point had an experience where I had to let someone go and I had to accept it. And it's still 20 years later, still is with me. But a long story short, I think the two things that came out of that experience for me was a belief that a human being, after they're gone, there's more to life. There's something more out there for me. So that was my first definitive step forward into believing in spirits. I remember a friend asking me about my friend and saying, do you think she's gone forever? And I said, no, she's always with us. And that was spirit. So, sorry, I'm getting emotional. So that was the first one. The second one was also around death, which was just after I married Mike, about 6 months after Mike and I had got married. His mother was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer and had a prognosis of 12 months to live. And so she was based in the UK because Mike is from the UK, but we were living in Sydney here. And so we made the decision at that time to move our entire life over to the UK to spend as much time as we could with her. And so over the next 8 weeks, I think it was, from when we found out the news, I got a job transfer through my work. We got ready to sell our unit and we found a place to move. And on the weekend that we were due to fly over, Mike's mum passed away from complications, and Mike never got the chance to say goodbye to her. He never got the chance to see her and be with his family during that. And I know I carried a lot of guilt through that we didn't get there in time. But I think the other thing for me is we still went forward with our move, but we found ourselves there without the purpose of why we were there. So we were lost and we were stuck and we were depressed and we were grieving. And it was a really challenging time in our lives. And then when I bring it back to my career, I was also in a role at that time where I just didn't feel connected emotionally to it. Because I had made the decision to start this job to be with Mike's family, it wasn't, once the circumstances had changed, I was there for different reasons, and it wasn't enjoyable, it wasn't fulfilling, I felt stuck. And then in hindsight, again, one of those moments where you look back with gratitude, my entire team were made redundant. And I remember thinking at this time, so this was about 6 months after Mike's mum had passed away, and we'd had challenge after challenge after challenge. And I remember I got made redundant at 3 p.m. and I remember walking back home to tell Mike the news at about 5:30. And again, I remember this voice inside of me said, you've got this. This has happened for a reason and you're going to be fine. And I was. And I remember I told Mike, and Mike was shocked. And he was like, aren't you upset? And I was like, no, this is the gift we need. And what led from that moment was then our decision and our commitment to go back, to return to Sydney, return back to where our place of home was, because we were living this life that wasn't a life. We were full of grief and anger and upset, and we couldn't really evolve forward. So I think Mike and others at times thought I was crazy, but I just had this inner belief inside of me that I knew that this was the chance, the opportunity, and the universal, whoever had given me this gift of change and evolution. And, you know, it was the right move for us and our family, and it really took us a step forward in our healing as well. And so again, that inner belief and trust was so key for me. And then the third trigger event, which was probably the most aggressive, I think, in terms of this, was about 5 years ago when I was on maternity leave. I'd just given birth to my second daughter, Ellie, and I've always been very career driven, very, very focused, very much about the next level. And while I was on maternity leave, I was asked to take a new role with a new team, a new department, a new boss, and to return from maternity leave earlier. And again, because I was so masculine in my focus and so focused on my career, I said, yes, this is something I've got to do. And as a result, I actually made sure that as a result, I basically went back, but I wasn't ready. And it was a highly toxic, highly masculine environment where it was all about action, achievement, etc. But I felt like, what do you call it? The peg in the square hole. I just didn't fit. I wasn't in the right frame of mind. I actually wasn't ready to come back. I wasn't ready to be separated from my daughter and work in such a highly challenged environment. And I started having panic attacks. I let it get to me. I let the overwhelm, the stress, everything get to me. And again, I remember feeling so lost and so vulnerable and so lonely and like just not in a good place. And I remember one night I was thinking, what is going on? So I went into my study and I actually Googled. I went to Dr. Google and I said all these things that I'm experiencing, and it came back. Top of the Google list was, these are the signs that you're having a spiritual awakening, and I was not really open to that. It wasn't something I was ready for because I was in the pain. I was in the depths and the darkness, and I wanted a quick fix. I wanted someone to save it for me and just give me the answers. And they were like, no, these are all the signs of a spiritual awakening. And I remember thinking, no, it wasn't thinking, it was feeling. I felt, finally, I felt connected again. I felt like it gave me the hope I needed, because it made me realize I wasn't batshit crazy. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't bonkers. I wasn't wrong. It was something that happens to so many of us. But again, it came down to me, a choice to accept it, to be open to it, and to make sure that I allowed this process to happen. And boy, did I hate it. Like, it took probably 4 times longer than I thought it would take. It was like 1 step forward, 2 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps, 5 steps back sometimes. I still feel like I'm healing at times 5 years later. It's one of those things that you're constantly evolving, you're constantly pushing yourself, you're constantly growing from. But with that, underpinning all of that now is this acceptance that I have, that I am spiritual, I am a believer, I believe in my soul, I believe in spirit, I believe in the universe, and I believe in things that happen for a reason that I can't explain, that things are bigger than me, and that's good. And that's why I use these 5 examples as times where I go, yes, shit happens. Yes, you can be in either an amazingly high or an amazingly low place. But what happens is how you evolve from the ashes, or how you ascend up to a higher being, in a way, to be able to give back to other people in some way, shape or form. So that's it. Sorry, I know I've waffled for so long. It's taken a while to get there.
But no, I really want to say thank you though, because giving such like solid examples of both those moments of true like heartbreak, and also, the way that the serendipity, like that I use synchronicity, the magic that if we allow this can, maybe we really are being guided, as you say. I just felt that I had to go that night, and there was my husband who feels like I'm meant to be, So, I love all of that. I really feel there'll be things in there that people can will resonate with. Yeah. And I'd love to know, how do you weave spirituality now through your daily life? What sort of things do you do that keep you feeling like a spiritual person?
Yeah. I'm going to try and relate as much as I can back to the corporate environment, because I think that's one I've struggled with the most, if I'm honest.
Great.
And before I share some examples, I want to do a big disclaimer which is I'm still a work in progress. I'm absolutely perfect.
We are all
I'm
a
still
work in progress. We are all a work in progress. I haven't met anyone that's not.
Exactly.
Please
No,
share.
that's it. So
I love
I
that
think
disclaimer. Please share.
yeah, please disclaim work in progress. So I think the way I look at spirituality in action now for me daily, especially when it comes to my job in the corporate environment, is I have a choice every day that I can make. And that choice is whether to let my ego and my head rule my thoughts, feelings, and actions, or I have a choice to let my heart and my soul guide me on a deeper, more meaningful purpose that maybe I can't describe, but I feel within me, and I let that be my guide. So that's what I try to apply. I find that the old me, before I had a lot of these experiences, was very unconscious, very unaware about a lot of my shortcomings. So I used to be brilliant at playing the victim. I used to be brilliant at judging others. I used to be really good at when I felt very vulnerable or confused or inadequate, I would push back. You know, I would project onto other people. It was always them, it was never me. And now I've been able to flip it and go, okay, what is this telling me? Because if I used to be that person, now when I face criticism, I go, okay, what does it tell me about that person? And now what that allows me to do, that gives me permission to feel fear as I do. I feel fear every day. Like, this is scaring me doing this stuff with you now. But I feel the fear and the thoughts still pop up. Will people judge me? What will they think? Do they think I'm crazy? But now I allow myself to feel it, and I make that conscious decision to step forward into action anyway. And I think that to me is spirituality in action. I think it's about being conscious, being aware, and making an active decision to move forward into positive feeling, action, thought, or anything that you live your life by.
I love that. Because spirituality in action, I actually feel that's really not as many people have talked of that. You know, people have talked about meditating practices or movement practices or journaling and things like that. But I love it when it feels so real, and how can I actually show up in, you know, in each moment, and with that awareness, with that conscious awareness. No, I think that's fabulous. Great suggestion. Thank you.
I mean, I do that. I do all the, I go through phases. Like I've been meditating since I was 18 on and off. I've done the journaling, all of that. But I think, and I know you and I've talked about this in the past, I let my energy guide me. So if I don't want to do it, I don't do it. I accept it. If I don't feel connected to writing, I won't write at that time. Because again, I think it comes back to my version of love and the heart leading over the head. Is now I'm trying to be softer, and I'm trying to let my inner compass guide me to where I need to be, which is really hard in the corporate environment when everyone's very masculine and very action oriented. It can be quite hard, and I think I've overused that energy a lot. So now one of my big objectives this year, goals this year if you like, is unlearning that, or finding a way to switch with more feminine nurturing energy to actually become more softer, more genuine, authentic, the real Clare underneath, and bring that to work, and bring that leadership in action, that courage in action to be different than the masses, which is really scary at times, to really come to the fore.
Yeah. I totally, and I can see how, because from my own perspective, I'm really good at the feminine bit, but I was imbalanced the other way, and without sufficient masculine, I wasn't getting anything done. So it's funny the way we need both of these aspects of ourselves, but it's interesting how easily we can fall back into the one that is our kind of our preference, and there's almost a consciousness to that as well, like, oh, actually, you know, you need to get up and get this done. Create a beautiful feminine container for it, but you have to get this piece of work done. And the other thing, I'm wondering if you would do an amazing job of describing it, because you talked about that feeling the fear and then going forward into it with courage. but also that letting your energy guide. And I feel that sometimes people struggle with it. Is my energy saying I don't want to go there, or am I just afraid to go there?
Oh, I love that. So the way I would describe that is, what is your heart saying and what's your head saying? Because most of the time the head is the fear, and it's this systematic habit that a lot of people are unconscious of, but it shows up in your body. So I look at it and I go, when my belly is all like this, as it was before I was about to talk to you, as it was yesterday when I forced myself to do my first video Facebook Live, which I realized wasn't really a live because I don't know how to do the technical stuff, but I forced myself out there and I was freaking out and it scared the bejesus out of me. But I was like, you know what? My growth is what's important. And you know, getting out of my head of who's going to judge me, who's going to be the person that goes, oh, doesn't she look like an idiot? You know, that's my head. That's my ego. And I need to dial that down. So I see it, I hear it, and I acknowledge it. But what comes out is my energy in my heart. And I now need to flip it. So what I've realized is I always used to lead with this and forget about this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lead, or I'm leading more with my heart. And I'm trusting myself, and I'm sensing this, or I listen to it, but I don't let it govern or dominate me. I don't let this decide anymore.
Oh, I love that. That's perfect. That's great, because I think people will hear that and go, okay, I get what she's saying. Like, that makes sense to me. Oh, that's fair. I've actually been doing this for a while, but hopefully that will make sense to other people as well. Thank you so much. And just my last question is, what advice would you have for somebody curious to begin their own exploration of spirituality?
Okay, I'm going to get really corporate again because I'm trying to bring.
I love it. Let's keep corporate in here. I love it.
So I'm going to quote Nike, just do it. So again, it's that action. And I think the curiosity for me is what underpinned everything through every phase of my life, where it's something defined it, which took me a step forward into accepting my belief in spirituality. Curiosity was everything for me. And so if you're curious and you're listening to these videos and you're finding connections with certain people, follow that. Trust your instinct and trust yourself that a new path could open up and it could give you beautiful experiences or growth or insight or wisdom in a way you never foresaw. So you need to trust, you need to open up, and you need to also let go. And those things, again, are really hard when you're always stuck up here. So it's really about just getting into yourself and chilling out and just relaxing and starting to see that another way is possible. And you know what? It could be a better way.
I love it. And it doesn't need to look like anybody else's way, but follow your curiosity. I love it. Start to listen to those instinctive feelings, that intuition, whatever word you want to use, gut instinct, whatever. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And so I want to, just to close, say, if anyone's curious about you and your work, where would they go to find out more?
Sure.
Oh, it just cut out right as you said that.
KinseyCoaching.com.
It's okay. I'm going to have the links underneath. KinseyCoaching.com. Got it. Perfect.
That's it.
Yeah, wonderful.
Did it get there?
Yeah, I think we got that. That's all good. It's all good. Thank you so much for joining me. I love that we had a corporate flavor to these interviews. So I really appreciate that, because that is somewhere where bringing a bit more of that love in would be, could make some significant change. So thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jo. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. I loved it.
Yay. It's been so good to have you. Thank you. Bye now.